Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman. In this interview today, Bela, you talk with long-term sailors Rich and Helen Lobel about their sailing experiences. Rich shares his background growing up sailing on the Severn River in Maryland, and he had a whole bunch of different sailboats over the years. And Helen discusses her sailing journey, which begins in Connecticut, and included some interesting experiences in Australia and England. So together, they're going to recount with you their adventures sailing in Florida and Chesapeake Bay. Should we get right into the interview, Bela?
Yeah, before we do that, Mike, let's just take a second here to say a special thank you to our supporters. Several listeners are supporting the podcast via Patreon. If you'd like to join them in supporting the podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/sailingtheeast.
Right, you are, Bela. Yep. Thanks to our listeners for their support. And now let's dive right into today's discussion with Rich and Helen Lobel.
Welcome to Sailing the East podcast. I'm Bela, and today I'm here with Helen and Rich Lobel. And they are some longtime sailors. They live down in Florida, and they've had some great experiences. And that's what we're going to chat about today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hi.
It's nice to see you as a real person.
Yes, yeah. So you've been a listener for a while, I take it.
Yeah, quite a while. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Thank you. So let me start first by asking a little bit about your sailing experience. When did you guys start? How long you've been sailing?
Well, I grew up on the Severn River in Maryland, which is home to the Naval Academy. And my father had a sailboat, first a boat called an Indian Landing 20, which is essentially a Lightning knockoff, an open day sailor. And then he moved up to a boat called a King's Cruiser, which was a Swedish sloop, again, all wood. So I was brought up around sailing.
And then you had sailboats as an
then fast forward 20 years or something, and then I had a couple of boats on the Chesapeake. I had a Columbia 8.7 and then a Beneteau Idyll 11.5, which I sailed around the Chesapeake.
Yeah, the Chesapeake is a great place to sail. We've done many, many charters down there, and up near Annapolis, the Severn River. We used to charter out of Rock Hall, and just a great place. It gets a little hot and muggy in July and August, but
hot and muggy. It's like the surface of the sun with humidity
and no wind.
Yeah, exactly, and shallow water.
Yeah, and lots of jellyfish.
Sea nettles, so you can't swim.
But other than that, it's wonderful.
Perfect. Yeah, couldn't be better.
And how about you, Helen? What's your sailing background?
I grew up in Connecticut. My dad had power boats. And after, when I left home, I developed a love of sailing and would crew with friends. Crewed in Australia a little bit when I was in school down there. Sailed in England a little bit. And then in Connecticut, we had an island trader, 44, I believe, or 41 or 44. It's been a long time. It was in a previous incarnation. And then when I moved to Florida and met Richard, we started fractional sailboat ownership together. He didn't have a boat at that time to see if we wanted to sail together. And then we ended up getting we loved that, just loved it. And
we sailed a little Jeannot 37
yeah.
and had a great time. It's a shallow enough and short enough boat that we could go down the inside. You were a little limited because you could only take the boat for 2-3 days on this, partnership kind of deal. But it was a great boat to get our feet wet, so to speak, here down south.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something you don't hear a lot about all that much is these kind of, I'll use it, formal partnerships where you can buy in and get a part of a boat. I mean, it's 2 or 3 people often get together and buy a boat. But it was very popular for a while. Is that still going on? Are you aware of that?
Well, it's interesting because I just texted with a guy that actually, it's a little more complicated. There's a guy who owns half a dozen or so boats. And what happens is you buy in on a monthly basis, a half a share, a full share, a double share, and you get certain amounts of time. And he has a very sophisticated scheduling program that you can use online to get time on the boat. And if no one else takes it, you can take it as much as you want to, but you have to wait until the last minute to determine if that's happened. And by doing that, he pays off all these boats and then sells a half dozen boats, I don't know, a number of years down the road. And that's how he makes his money. But it's a great thing. You have to clean up the boat before you leave. You have to disappear before the next person arrives. So it has the aura of you being the captain owner, even though you're not. And the boats are immaculate and relatively perfect. You write up a loose nut or a loose bolt or a stain somewhere, and it gets taken care of before the next person gets on board.
It was great fun. We had great fun on that little boat.
Yeah. That sounds. It's sort of the timeshare version of boats, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Oh, so talk to me a little bit about your boat. What do you have, et cetera?
Well, from the Geno, we jumped to a boat much like yours. We had a 44-foot Hunter deck salon, and we owned that one for several years. And then it's actually a good story. We owned this Hunter, and I had been looking at boat porn, which is, what we refer to as yacht world. And I saw a boat that was local here, which is a 47-foot tartan. And this was a number of years ago, and it was 2012. So the boat was quite new, and the price looked really exceptional to me. So I said to Helen, we're not doing anything. Let's go look at it. So we went, we saw the boat, and it was beyond our wildest dreams. I mean, it's a fabulous boat. And while we were standing there looking at the boat, the broker was with us and said, I just got a full price offer, sight unseen, from Annapolis. So the boat's sold. So we both said
It was a nice way to spend the afternoon, and that was probably a good thing. We weren't really looking to buy.
And we had our boat. So
Sure.
at any rate, the broker, who was a woman in her late 20s or
late
30s,
maybe mid 30s,
and with how many children?
4,
4 children, was living on a Hunter
30 something.
34 or something like
Oh my
that.
gosh.
And she called us and about 3 or 4 weeks later and said, are you still interested in the boat? Because the deal fell through. And we said, yeah,
Well, but the other piece of the story is she, from the outset, said, I want to buy your boat. But it's not for sale. We were just window shopping, just having fun. And she said, I really want to buy your boat.
And then during the, I think it was the Fort Lauderdale boat show, she calls us rather in a panic and said, and she's living aboard this boat, by the way, with her children.
Yeah.
And she calls us in a panic and says, my boat just burned. I need to buy your boat now.
I have no place to live.
So we put together the deal, and we ended up buying the tartan. She bought our Hunter, so there was no fee in selling the Hunter, which is, it's a 10%
Sure.
advantage. Yeah. And the price that we got the new boat for was, we thought, quite exceptional. And here we are. So we have a Tartan 4700. There are only 4 of them in existence.
Wow. And you bought, and I mean, the best part of that story is you bought your new boat and sold your old boat in the same transaction.
Yes.
Yeah. And without paying, without a broker's
Right.
fee to sell our boat.
Yeah. So that's marvelous. So talk to me a little bit about the Tartan 4700, is it?
Yeah. Tartan built a 4400, which is a 44-foot version of the boat. And someone came along and said, I'd like to be able to have, I don't know, more full-size queen bed in the after, and also a full-size queen forward. And so I want to design that. And I guess the guy worked with Tartan, and they designed the 4700. And it's a grown-up version, a stretch version, if you will, of the 4400. There are, like I said, there are only 4 of them in existence. And what's fun, by the way, is 2 of the owners have become good kind of pen pals, and we converse almost daily about the boats and complain about stuff that we don't like, and share knowledge about stuff that we need to know. And it's a beautiful boat. I sent you a picture of the cover of Cruising World, which is literally our boat on the cover there. A solid cherry wood inside, hand-built boat, carbon fiber pocket boom, carbon fiber mast, just amazingly beautiful boat.
Yeah. And relatively high performance, I would imagine.
No, relatively sluggish, I would imagine.
Is that right?
It has a specially designed shoal keel.
Yeah.
So it only draws 5.5 feet. So I think the combination of the 5.5 foot draft, as opposed to the way it was actually originally designed, with this huge rig on top of it, this 70-foot tall rig, it's like everybody else. We kind of say we're going to go about half the wind speed, and that's about what we do. But we're not winning any races with this thing
Right.
without
Got
a big handicap.
it.
But the trade-off is we've been in some really sloppy stuff, and we've never felt that we couldn't depend on the boat. I mean, it's built solidly.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time, the crew gives up before the boat does.
Yes.
Yeah, we were out in the Exumas in November, and an owner near us who had been out in some just horrific stuff. You hear stories when you're stuck in the marina for a few days. He said, the boat will take it. The crew may not, but the boat will take it. And we really, that meant a lot to us. It struck home.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. I've sailed on a bunch of other people's boats that were in the high 30s, low 40s, chartered a bunch of boats sort of in that range. I would say, 40 feet to 35 feet. And our boats are 45. And boy, there's a big difference in sort of the loads. That's one of the things I noticed, right? I mean, the bigger boats have bigger sails and gosh, the forces going on are a lot higher. How was that transition for you going from your 44-foot Hunter to this 47-foot tartan?
Well, what we also went to was push button everything on the tartan.
Yeah.
The tartan has electric furlers forward, electric winches in the cockpit, electric winch on the cabin top to hoist the main. So it was it was kind of easier instead of harder.
Yeah.
I mean, you certainly know, I'm always saying to Helen, would you ease the jib a little bit? And, I just say afterward, put your hand around that drum. There's a lot of force, so you're aware of it, and there is a lot of force, but it's mitigated by the fact that we have electric and hydraulic everything.
Got it. So is it a furling mainsail?
No, it's not. It's a Park Avenue boom. We, with all due respect to your Hunter, we had a furling main on the Hunter, and it was known to, you've had discussion on the podcast with other people about the intricacies of how to position them and being careful and all that stuff.
Right.
Well, I guess we didn't do it once or twice, including the first sail, the demo sail. It got jammed and took
Sea trial.
Yeah, it took a half an hour to get it out again. But so we were happy to have a fully battened mainsail that you just let go and it comes straight down with lazy jacks, and that's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of these have advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that I think about them is the disadvantage fatal? Meaning, if something goes wrong, how can you recover from it? And a jam mainsail is, because it's only jamming when the wind is blowing really hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that makes me nervous. And I jammed mine once, and it was a nervous time, and it wasn't really blowing really hard, but it's tension and stress you can do without. So there are times when I think, boy, it would be nice to have a more conventional rig on it. And one of the lessons that I learned is I reef my sails early. And that has helped prevent me from getting into situations I don't want to be into, where I'm trying to, reef my mainsail and it's blowing 20 knots.
Yeah.
When I get above 15, when I'm at 15 knots, I'm taking the first reef in my main and in my jib. And sometimes even a little sooner than that if I know if the wind is building. And it makes managing the sails a lot nicer. And quite frankly, the boat sails better when it's more balanced and, nothing's overpowered and stuff. But yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, I find that reefing is not a clean endeavor in our boat, in that, it's purportedly you can do all the reefing from the
Yeah.
cockpit, and you never have to go forward and stuff. But you can mark the lines for what should be the proper position for number one, number two reef. But it never seems to be as clean as that. You get out of the cockpit and look around the Dodger, and there's 1.5 feet of line above the boom and into the new kringle on the sail. So I don't know. And plus, you have to really be into the wind to do it effectively.
Yes.
So you can either luff the boat up, I guess, which I don't do. I start the engine and reef the sails, and so it's a little bit of a sloppy operation to me. And maybe that's just operator error. I don't know.
Yeah. That's the one thing I will say about the in-mast furling is that when it goes smooth, it goes really smooth.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't, it doesn't. So
I'll tell
what
you
kind
what,
of, go ahead. No, go ahead. I didn't want to
I
cut
was
you
going to
off.
say it is nice to have the electric furlers, because
Yeah.
you want to reef the jib, you can be in whatever position you want to. Just luff it up, pull it in a ways, and push button, and that's cool.
Yeah, I was on an Amel that I helped someone bring from Nova Scotia back down to Baltimore, and that had all electric, mainsail kind of reefing and the jib, and that was really easy.
Yeah.
You could basically take in a reef at almost at any point of sail. That was wonderful. So what type of safety equipment? You guys have a life raft?
Actually, we don't. We've kind of convinced ourselves that we would try to abandon ship if we had to in the dinghy. We have a 10.5-foot AB. And that's probably stupid, to be quite frank with you. And we probably should have a life raft. We were trained on the life raft for the first time when we got our captain's licenses. And when I say trained, we saw videos of how to use them, et cetera, along with videos of how the Coast Guard would pick you up. And we ended up thinking, oh my God, I hope we never have to do that.
Airlifted.
Yeah.
But no, we have the standard stuff that you'd expect us to have: the life sling and life
Keeper.
jackets. Yeah. Strobes on our life jackets.
Excellent. And do you have AIS?
We do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I've heard you talk about how wonderful AIS is, and other guests of yours saying I'd never leave shore without it. We feel the same way. I mean, it's so nice to be able to talk, particularly to big ships.
Yes. I think it's better than radar.
We haven't
in other
ever
words,
figured
if
out how
I
to
could-
use the radar.
Yeah. If I could only have one of those, AIS or radar, I'd rather have the AIS. And like you said, one of the big advantages is the name, particularly if it's a commercial big boat, its name. So it's much easier to call them than saying, well, this is the little sailboat that's 2 miles south of you.
Yeah. And for us, the crossing over to the Bahamas is not an infrequent one, and there are north-south routes that intersect your destinations. So it's really nice to have it.
Yeah, I agree. I love mine. And do you guys, when you go out offshore, do you wear harnesses?
We are equipped with harnesses, but no. And I mean, if we thought we were going to go out in something that was going to be bad, I would certainly get the lazy jacks in place. We have the equipment on board, but ordinarily Helen just forbids me to leave the cockpit no matter what. And that's how we operate.
Yeah, that's great. Everyone does it differently. And I'm always interested to learn how other people do things.
Well, we do don a life jacket. If I'm going up to the mast, for instance, to strike the main, I do stand at the base of the mast and stand there with a boat hook and pull down the main the last 5 or 6 feet. I religiously put on a life jacket anytime I leave the cockpit and we're not sort of in the marina.
Yeah. We on my boat, if we're away from the dock, everybody wears a life jacket.
Yeah,
we have those inflatable ones, so they're not encumbering at all. And one of the reasons we do that is we have 3 grandchildren. So
set the example.
if adults do it, then the kids will do it.
Yes.
But
Have you changed the CO2 cartridges on your inflatables? Have you done that?
I have not.
Yeah, neither have I. I've watched the YouTube stuff on it, and it looks daunting to me.
Oh, I thought, I mean, I had to install the CO2 cartridges when I got it, I think. It seemed pretty, oh no, wait a minute. I did have one that came with the boat, an older one that I popped just to sort of experience it. And I had to put
Jumped in the water and popped it?
Yeah, I jumped in the water and popped it. Yeah. It wasn't a self popping one. You had to pull the little cord on it. The ones we have are all they'll self-inflate.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, you said you both went and got your Coast Guard licenses.
We did, yeah. Actually, we're at the stage right this minute where everything's been submitted to the Coast Guard, and we're just waiting for them to tell us we've done things wrong and we can't have our licenses, or get our licenses, one or the other.
So, talk to me a little bit about that. Did you guys take a formal course?
We did. We're fortunate enough to live just outside of Fort Lauderdale. And so we have Sea School, which is 20 minutes from here.
Yes.
And we took a 2 weeks, 3 days course. And you learn all sorts of useless things that you'll never use again. And some things that were actually kind of fun to know and to see. Don't stand in the bite of a line. That seems pretty simple. But when you see someone who's had their leg ripped off, it
drives it home.
yeah, you get it,
Right.
so to speak. And it was not simple. It was not easy. We studied, we made flashcards for ourselves. We did pass everything the first time around. And we're not sorry that we did it. We got a reduction in our insurance from Geico, Boat US, as a result of having done it.
We had to do CPR. We had to have a physical. We had to have a drug test. All part of.
It's expensive. By the time you're through doing everything, I think it was well over $1,000 each, right? We kept pushing on and saying, do we really want to do this? We're never going to use it.
We did it more as a challenge.
Yeah, sure.
And to see what we could learn.
Yeah, and to learn.
Yeah. So there's a written part of that. There's like a written exam component.
Yes.
Is there a practical skills part of it as well?
Actually, one of the things that's probably most surprising about the whole thing is that there isn't. You have to state under penalty of, I guess being put in a black ops site by the US government or something, that you have a certain amount of experience and when it was and what it was on, but there's nothing. You don't have to show that you know a bow from a stern to anyone human. That's one of the most surprising things about it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is a requirement to have a minimum number of hours on a vessel. Is that correct?
Yes. And that's, you have to put it all in writing and say what vessel, and you have to put down
For the last 5 years.
yeah, that
Every month, how many
proof
hours
that you
spent.
own the vessel, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great. Well, hopefully they'll accept your paperwork and you guys will get your licenses.
Yeah, we'll send you a stupid picture with us holding. Do you know that there's nothing that says captain on any of this stuff? It all says operator of, but there's nothing that says you, because, you want to be a captain, but you're not.
Well, I think if you're in charge of the boat, you are by definition the captain.
Well, that's certainly true, but don't you want it in writing so that you can put it behind you and, have people say, oh, captain, whoa.
Well, yeah, I would put my failure notice behind me. But yeah, so I think legally, if you're in charge of the boat, you are the captain by definition, whether you have a license or not.
One of the fun things when you first get on the radio is having other people refer to you as captain.
Captain,
no matter
yeah.
how ignorant you are or incapable you are, you're still captain.
Yes, that's my point, right? I've called marinas. The first time I called the marina, I didn't know what I was doing, and the guys called me a captain. I go, whoa.
Yeah, how cool is that? I'm a captain.
Yes, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about, so you said you're Fort Lauderdale, and talk to me a little bit about sort of keeping a boat in Florida, sort of what's involved,
Especially during
is it
hurricane season.
yeah,
it's
yeah.
true.
Like, what are the rules about that? And
Yeah.
what do you guys do and stuff?
Well, we we as with everything else, we learned the hard way. First of all, we live up around Fort Lauderdale, but the boat is in Miami, and the reason for that is it's Fort Lauderdale is not a very practical place to have a sailboat because you're up a river someplace to keep the boat, or in a marina up a river and up up the intercoastal a bit, and then you've got an hour and a half, or if you're lucky, you've got 45 minutes to get to the ocean, and then your sailing is sailing back and forth in the ocean, as opposed to being on Key Biscayne, which is a whole different thing, which is one of the most wonderful sailing grounds literally in the world. People come from all over the world to train there. During the winter months, you see teams from all over the world training for the Olympics, and it's just a very cool place to sail. A lot of places to overnight and drop a hook, or drop a hook and have lunch. It's really wonderful in that way. In terms of, we're in a place called Dinner Key Marina, which is the largest in-water marina in South Florida. 500 boats, just sticks as far as you can see. It's a wonderful sight. We marvel at it every day, but it's protected by a man-made barrier that is useless when the tide's really high, and completely useless when you have storm surge, which is really what kills boats in a hurricane. It's not the hurricane force winds, contrary to popular belief. For the most part, it's storm surge. So we left our Hunter in the marina during Irma, and we took everything off of her and doubled up on all the lines, and spider web to the pilings, and we were really did everything we could do. And when we got back to the boat, first of all, it was floating, which was an achievement because about half of everything else in the marina was on the bottom.
Unbelievable how many boats sank.
But the boat looked like a great white shark had taken a bite out of the gunnel. It had rubbed itself against one of the pilings and had completely perforated both the deck and the side of the boat to the tune of about 6 inches above and below the gunnel, and about 2.5 or 3 feet long,
Wow.
which resulted in a $40,000 repair, which Boat US was absolutely wonderful about. I'll do a little commercial for Boat US. They were great. I mean, great, unbelievably great. And we got the boat fixed. And now, because of that experience, we actually rent for 6 months a second parking spot behind someone's house in Fort Lauderdale up the New River, so that if a storm does come, we can take our current boat and tie it off across a canal, which is much more survivable.
And escape the storm surge. I never understood what storm surge was until I saw what happened to these boats.
Yeah.
And they're floating docks at Dinner Key. So all the boats went up 12 feet in the air, whatever the storm surge height was, tipped over onto the piling, which then drilled through the hulls of these boats. There was one catamaran literally skewered right through the middle on a piling, and some really lovely boats with holes the size of pilings drilled right into the hulls, laying on the bottom.
So right now we're renting essentially 2 slips for 6 months.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate to be able to do that, to even find a place like that.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
people have half-laid plans about taking them into the mangroves and tying them off to the mangroves, and things people have done for 100 years to make their boats survive. But that's our plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. So what about, are there other things that are important about having a boat in Florida? I mean, do you have to worry about
networks.
other things?
Yeah, air conditioning that works, and immunity to listening to the sound of your generator all night if you want air conditioning to sleep. We kind of have a family guideline that if it's going to be 72 at night, we're delighted. We have a forward berth and 2 huge openings that allow the wind to blow over you, because the boat's naturally, as you know, pulled into the wind by the nose. And it makes very comfortable. It's very comfortable. And beyond that, we have to use the generator, and it's like having a jackhammer in the, in the main salon. So it's not very comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
The alternative to that is staying in a marina, which is, so you have electricity, and it's a tremendous cost.
Yeah. Yeah. So how much is a transient slip for a night at a marina down there? What do they charge per foot?
It's stupid. I think Dinner Key, first of all, they have some kind of, I don't know, political, at any rate, if you can get one, it's like $5 a foot. But most of the time they'll turn you away, and we don't understand it because it looks like there are open slips all over the place. But it's very difficult to get in there as a transient. And the Bahamas ain't cheap either. We were supposed to be in the Bahamas now, but we have a kid that's got some medical stuff going on, so we wanted to stay close to home. But we have friends over there, and they were over $400 a night at Compass Key, including, because you have to, pay their VAT, which is not cheap, on top of $3 or $4 a foot, and electricity. Now, fortunately, they have a water maker, and so do we, so we don't have to buy water, which is anywhere from 35 to 75 cents a gallon for RO water out there.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
Yeah. Up where I am, up in New England, the Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts shoreline, it's hard to find a transient slip for less than $5 a foot.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask you, a lot of times you refer to staying in this or that yacht club, but I know that you are not in a yacht club because you're a safe harbor marina. Yeah. So how do you stay in the yacht clubs?
So when I stayed at those yacht clubs, those were on some passages I was on with other people. And both times on two of those trips, they were members of the Salty Dog Sailing Association.
Yeah.
And they have some agreements with certain yacht clubs that you can stay there. Yeah. So they often, that may be one of the things you're referring to. The other thing is that if you're in a safe harbor marina, you can stay, if you keep your boat berthed 12 months a year at a safe harbor marina, then you can stay at any other safe harbor marina for free overnight.
It seems that Safe Harbor is going to buy all of the yacht clubs and marinas sooner or later. Every place we go now, when we're transient, we seem to be, Marathon is a safe harbor. There's a safe harbor now right next to us in Miami. They're all over the place.
Yeah. So that's what we I didn't know this doing it. It was just a marina that was closest to where my son lives in Rhode Island. And it has worked out really well because our typical trip is we like to go from marina to marina. It just, because you can plug in if it's hot, you can get off the boat. Not everyone in my family likes to be on the boat 24 hours solid. So we tend to go to marinas, and there's safe harbor marinas all over New England.
Yeah. And
if we can't get into one, we can usually get into another one that's less than 10 miles away, and it's free.
That's amazing.
So, and I think last year we stayed a total of 9 nights at safe harbor marinas, and that's several at $5 a foot.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice offset to your home marina.
Yeah. It's been that's one of the features about them is that I really enjoy. And all the safe harbor marinas, I shouldn't say all of them, many of them have swimming pools and, very nice amenities and nice showers and all that kind of stuff. So when the grandkids come with us, going to a marina for an overnight stay that has a pool, we're done. We don't need to worry about anything else.
Babysitting's taken care of.
Right. That and a couple hot dogs, and we don't have to worry about anything else. So that's been a great benefit for us. And so I've really enjoyed keeping our boat at this safe harbor system. It's worked well.
They're generally nice marinas. The one in Marathon it's had a lot of work done to it as a result of becoming a safe harbor marina, because before it was just kind of another dopey Marathon, Florida marina, and they've done a lot to it.
Yeah, my home marina where I keep our boat, which is called Cove Haven, is they just put in a new pool and a new clubhouse. I mean, it's like a country club, so quite nice. So go ahead.
Yeah, we were going to mention crossing out to the Bahamas from here.
Yes,
Because we
yes.
thought that would be a lot of your listeners, I think, are interested in doing that. They have this kind of rule of thumb: never go out there in any kind of northerly component wind. It's as if the Kraken is out there and is going to grab your boat and sink it if you do that. We have crossed out there with slight northern components. We've crossed out there with 12 to 20. And there's some crashing into the waves involved, but there's nothing that you ever felt that you didn't feel comfortable having your feet up and watching what was going on as the autopilot did its thing and took you out to Bimini. Certainly better if you have something dead out of the south and can fly over on a beam reach and have the big sails out and all that stuff, but that's just not what happens most of the time.
Yeah.
So the crossing is, I would encourage people to do it and say it's not a big deal. Getting into Bimini is not a big deal. People talk about, that the shifting sands and the markers move. It's not that big a deal. You head in toward the beach and what is clearly marked at this point, and then turn left when you get to the beach and you're in the inlet. What's the name of the marina that we always stay in?
Blue Water?
Oh yeah, Bimini Blue Water Marina. We would highly recommend, mainly, well, for two reasons. One, it's cheap. It's like $1.50 a foot or something like that. Electric is extra, but how much can you use? And it's walking distance to customs. And what's most important about it is it's tucked in where it's not affected so much by the incoming and outgoing tides and currents. So it's pretty easy. What sailboats are like. They're not the most maneuverable things in the world. And you start hearing about 4 knots, 5 knots sometimes, and the wind messing with you to boot. It's tucked in, so you can get in and out very easily out of that one. So we'd recommend that marina.
Oh, very nice. And how long you guys leave from Miami, I would assume?
Yeah, most people get closer to the ocean and leave from there, but we're just on the other side of Biscayne Bay, so we just suffer the extra hour and 20 minutes. It's 52 miles from the time you kind of get out into the ocean. So with our boat, we usually plan at 6.5 knots and hopefully do a little bit better. So it's an all-day affair, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Very nice. And what other places have you explored over there in the Bahamas?
Well, we did 6 weeks out to the Exumas in November. Actually, kind of a good story because we checked in at Bimini, and I went off the boat because only the captain can kind of leave the boat. You know how that works. And went up to Customs and Immigration, and unbeknownst to me, Helen got off the boat to go in to check in with the office, and promptly slipped and fell, and found out later on she had actually broken her leg.
Oh my gosh.
This was her first step onto Bahamian soil. Literally.
And it was an illegal step.
It was.
Probably, yeah, probably.
I just fractured my fibula. So you couldn't tell. There's very limited medical care in the Bahamas. There is a clinic in Bimini, and one or two of the other boaters there had been into the clinic. We were leaving early the next day. It was 6 o'clock at night when this happened. I thought it was just a sprain. So we continued on our Exumas trip, and I didn't find out till we got back to the States in January, and I finally got an x-ray.
So the first step is out to Bimini. Then your next step, unless you do an overnight, is you're going to stay out on what they call the flats, which means it's pretty shallow water. Not a big deal to us because we're used to Biscayne Bay or the Chesapeake, all of which is shallow. So you go out there and you anchor somewhere out there overnight. We happen to, if you go out there in the wintertime, the northerlies are just a pain in the butt. You can have 20 knot, 25 knot winds, and it just makes for uncomfortable sleeping because you're just waiting for the anchor to drag, or you're getting a tremendous slap across the bow from the wind and waves. But at any rate, Helen doesn't mind it so much. We overnighted on the flats, and then the next day you anchor somewhere around Nassau. You go through what's called the tongue of the ocean. which is where they do submarine training because it's so deep. So you go from the shallow to some of the deepest there is around, and you cross over to Nassau. And most people, I think, take marinas, but we anchored out. And then the next jump is across this just balmy, the Australians call them bommies, but they're coral heads. And it's just laden. If you took a chart and shot it with a shotgun 2 or 3 times, that's what it looks like for position of these bommies. So
Wow.
you have to kind of stay awake. And we took a little bit longer route between 2 of the major fields and made our way over to the Exumas.
Over to Highborn.
Yeah, to Highborn Key and the Exumas.
Yeah.
And
these
then
were all day sails.
yes, yeah,
that
we don't
correct?
do night, just the 2 of us.
Yeah.
So once we got to the Exumas, it was just amazing.
Yeah,
Because
lovely.
you do these little short jumps, 20 miles, 10 miles, 5 miles. And once you get into the Exumas Park, they've got buoys, mooring buoys all over the place, which are $40 a night. And when we went there, which is early in the winter, they're open. There's no problem getting them. You don't worry about the wind. You're attached to something, you can relax, and the swimming is amazing, and the exploration with the dinghy is amazing. Highly recommend the Exumas.
Yeah. So when you say early in the winter, what's the early season?
We went literally on November the 17th, and we stayed until Christmas.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I have a severe case of anchor anxiety. So
The
I'm
mooring
much,
boats are so nice.
We have
Yeah.
all chain rode and a lot of it, and a 73-pound rock nut on the front of this boat. So
Yeah.
it's certainly, in theory, you should be able to sleep soundly.
yes,
But in reality, I have the same thing you have.
yeah, I have
Evidently,
a
it's
bad,
contagious.
yeah, a bad case of anchor anxiety. I do much better on a mooring. I do great at a marina.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, very nice. And so you also have you ever been down to the Keys?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
those were our first adventures.
Yeah,
So
talk a little bit about that.
if you're not going to make yourself crazy, you have to do relatively easy day jumps, 8 hours, 10 hours most. So what we do is we leave. We have to go outside. With this boat, it's 70 feet tall. So there's no such thing as the intercoastal for us, not because of depth so much as the height. We
Yeah.
get down one bridge down and we're done within Biscayne Bay. So we have to go outside. We jump outside to an island called Rodriguez Key and park someplace behind Rodriguez, drop an anchor there, overnight there. Then our next jump is Marathon, which is where we go to the Safe Harbor Marina. And then the next jump is Key West. And in Key West, there is a relatively expensive bunch of marinas there. And if you go in the summer, don't, because it's just
so hot.
hotter than the surface of the sun at this place. It's miserable. You have to keep ducking into stores to survive, for the air conditioning.
Yeah,
But in the wintertime, it's glorious down
Yeah,
there.
it's great fun.
yeah, very nice. Yeah, when you say it's hot and you live in Florida, that must really be hot.
Oh, it's awful, Bela. It
Yeah.
is, it's 90 something degrees with 90 something percent humidity.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
plus,
I just
when you live down here, you don't spend lots of time luxuriating out in the sun. You go from one air conditioned situation to the next, including on the boat.
Yeah.
So to be outside for 2-3 hours, walking around the streets of Key West to see
Not in
Truman's
July.
yeah.
house.
It's uncomfortable. I
You know,
always
I
say the summers down here are like the winters up north. You stay mostly inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the greatest inventions in the world is air conditioning.
Absolutely.
I mean, it made large parts of the world inhabitable, which
Yeah.
normally you wouldn't be.
I think I sent you a picture once, Bela, of our sea chest.
Yes.
Speaking
Yes.
of air conditioning, you should be able to. It's too bad you can't publish it on the podcast. We pulled the boat last June in order to get routine stuff done, to get a bottom job, get the sail drive serviced. Ended up getting a $50,000 bill because the boat was out for a month and they discovered stuff that, you really should take care of this. But when you got 3 guys at $150 an hour just taking care of this, plus pulling the boat and storing the boat and all. It was, at any rate, there are so many clams that grow in an air conditioning system down here that it is unfathomable.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable how much growth happens in 90-degree water and 80-degree water with a flowing system that's constantly nurturing these little beasts.
Yeah. So on your boat, when you talk about a sea chest, so there's a one sea cock that feeds this box, this enclosed box,
Right.
water comes into, and then the water from that box is distributed to all the systems on the boat. Is that how that works?
Right. All things saltwater are fed from that box. So that one line with that one sea strainer, which I clean about every week, believe it or not, we put an extra strainer on the outside of the boat because it used to have seagrass in it all the time. Now it just grows lumpy algae, which looks like me when I haven't shaved for about 3 weeks.
And we had shrimp in it the other day.
Oh, yeah.
In the sea strainer. We had little tiny baby shrimp swimming around. It was amazing.
But
Yeah.
you have to clean this stuff. You have to
Yeah.
you have to get good at taking barnacle buster and circulating it. By the way, one of the greatest things we discovered was a cap that goes onto our sea strainer and allows us to put a freshwater hose onto the sea strainer. So you shut off the sea cock and you can run fresh water through it or anything else, including barnacle buster.
Yes.
So you have to learn to barnacle bust your own air conditioning system.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily up north, we don't, our season up here, my boat's in the water 6 months, and it does get some stuff in it, but I don't have those issues that you guys have in that really warm part.
We went out to Bimini the first time for the 4th of July a few years ago and got out there and tied up to the dock, and our air conditioning didn't work.
Yeah.
Talk about not being able to sleep.
It was awesome.
So we turned around and went back to the States to get the boat fixed. Because we didn't know what we were doing. It was all full of clams.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm always amazed because I've done a lot of sailing on freshwater lakes, and there's hardly anything that grows in freshwater. And in saltwater, it's just amazing. It's teeming with life.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand the biology or the chemistry of what I always thought salt killed stuff, but it just seems like there's just unbelievable amounts of life. I mean, there's clams and stuff growing on the plastic part of the floating dock.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the cement part of the
And the cement, right?
and they get into your system in microscopic form and then mature.
Yes.
there.
And have a wonderful time.
babies.
Yeah, and have a wonderful time in your system.
Yeah.
We had a revelation, or I had a revelation about yesterday, I think it was. We were talking to one of the other owners of a Tartan 47, and he said he didn't have a salt water supply for his heads. It was strictly freshwater. Now, we never used the saltwater supply for ours. We only used the freshwater. But what I realized was that the guy who built this boat had the boat on the Great Lakes. So he would not use his drinking water, his fresh water supply, just use what we call the saltwater supply, because his was fresh.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So my boat is the heads are hooked up to my water tanks. So I use fresh water, but it keeps the salt water out of those toilets, which causes all sorts of problems.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. I can only imagine.
The biggest of which is smell.
Yes.
Or clam.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd hate to sit down and have a clam attack.
Yeah. How big is how much water does your boat hold?
200 gallons.
Oh, so that's nice and healthy. Yeah.
Plus, we have a water maker now. We bought a Rain Man portable, thinking, well, if we ever change boats, or if we don't change boats, we can sell this thing. And it was cheaper than putting in a fixed system, and it's great.
It's
I mean,
a
it
wonderful
really works well.
water maker.
You have to run the generator is the only downside, because it's 110 power. Way too much for the batteries. We don't have the battery power to do it.
Yeah.
But man, what a productive thing.
Yeah, those water makers, again, another great invention.
37 gallons an hour, I think.
Yeah.
If this
Yeah,
thing
that's incredible, right?
and
When
with
you
the
think about
showers
it.
that Helen takes, we need it.
There's nothing like a nice shower on a
Oh,
boat.
come on. Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day.
Yeah. Sometimes even two when it's really
That's
hot.
right.
I'm sorry.
But he was in the Exumas, he was hosing the boat down with fresh water out on the mooring.
How cool
Yeah.
is that? We hooked the the shower, the outside shower, the washdown shower,
Yes.
to a hose and hosed off our boat with fresh water. And in the Bahamas, you just don't do that.
Right.
Certainly, you don't do it at a marina because it's too expensive, and you don't do it when you're on the hook because you use up all your water. But we were
Yeah.
able to do it.
Yeah, very nice. Hey, so we've been talking for 45, 50 minutes. So I
You
want to
charge
start
by the hour or something?
Yes. So I want to start wrapping this up. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Not
Did you have something on your list?
No, not really. I think we covered it pretty well. I think one of the things that I would have mentioned that Helen kicked me under the table and said, don't, is how damned expensive it is to own a boat like this and to maintain it and keep it insured. It's ungodly how much it costs. I mean,
Yes.
it is not for the faint of heart.
That's right.
By the time you pay for a marina and if you mortgage your boat, even though you get a bit of a tax advantage from mortgaging a boat, and pay for maintenance.
The maintenance is, we're lucky we have a guy on our dock who maintains our boat, an old captain. He's fantastic.
You know, all the
Yeah.
stuff we can't or
But he-
don't want to do,
But we
he
always have
does.
stuff- Yeah.
But you know, we got an estimate recently to put new standing rigging on the boat, $18,000. We got estimates at the boat show for a new main and a new jib, $14,000. Polishing the boat twice a year, $2,400 per occasion. It's scary.
Yep. It's not for the faint of heart. As you
No,
said.
you know, people are deluding themselves to I think not know how expensive this is. Although you can do
Yeah.
it cheaper. I mean, you hear about people that are on the hook and they have
And if they can do it themselves, if they have the ability.
or don't have
We're
equipment
learning. We're getting very good at.
or don't
host
have
plans.
equipment that needs professionals to do it. You know, you can't fix your refrigeration very well yourself.
Yeah.
That's
You
right.
can't fix your air conditioners very well yourself.
That's
Your
right.
electronics, you can't fix that. You know, it's all professionals and it ain't cheap.
Right. Right. Yeah. Some of the stuff is beyond my skill level, way beyond.
But you do a lot of good stuff. I remember hearing you talk about doing sump pumps on your showers and
Yeah.
things, you know, and getting little parts and fixing it as opposed to replacing the box and all that stuff. That's good.
Yeah. I'm brave. I didn't say I was smart. I just said I was brave.
Yeah, we
So
started
what,
to do,
I'm sorry, I cut you off
we
again.
started to do more and more ourselves, things that
Yeah.
we wouldn't do when we were working because we had an income. We now do ourselves, and it's actually kind of fun.
It's called boat surgery. It's fun.
Yeah. I actually get that's one of the elements of satisfaction I get out of having a boat is fixing some of that stuff, you know,
Yeah.
being an engineer and sort of saying, oh, wow, I can try to figure this out.
Yeah.
I get a little bit of satisfaction out of that. So let me ask you one other question before we wrap up. What plans you have for the next 6 months?
If we get this kid going medically, we wanted to go up the East Coast and come up your way and possibly stay at your
So
house
much
for a
wanna go
week
to
or
New
two.
England. Yeah.
And yeah, we want to get up to New England and we
Great.
have these friends with a trawler that are right across the dock from us, and they did Newfoundland and up to the Great Lakes and just amazing trip that they did. But we want to go up the East Coast.
Yeah.
That would be our goal. We'll go back to the Bahamas, and we were supposed to be in Spanish Wells about now if we hadn't been lassoed to stay here. That's on the agenda.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the
that's
East
wonderful.
Coast, sailing the East Coast, you might have heard of that.
Yeah, I have. I think there's a podcast about that.
Yeah, really good.
Thank you. I think one of the great things about coming up the East Coast is 90% of it you can do outside and do day sails. There's just a few places where you're going to have to go overnight because you know there's no place to go in.
Yeah.
But a good large portion of it you can do inlet to inlet to inlet. You got a time going through the inlets, but that's one of the nice parts about it, I think.
Boy, there's something I can tell your listeners about. We were going out of Government Cut, which is a major ship channel, you know, like destroyers come in and out of there and aircraft carriers and big,
Cruise ships.
yeah, stuff that's big. And we thought we were not vulnerable at all, nothing. And we happened to time it when there was an outgoing tide and an incoming breeze, and we slammed through there like those things where you see a submarine that's surfacing and the nose comes out of the water and then slams down it. We were doing that over and over again with our 47-foot heavy boat. It was impressive.
It was impressive.
Never knew that existed in big channels.
Yeah. Well, that's wind against current.
Yes.
Yeah, but I thought that was little channels,
No.
stuff that was 50 yards wide, not a super ship channel.
You'll get that in the Gulf Stream if the wind is strong enough.
Yeah.
And that's a real wide channel.
We were told stay more to the sides of the channel when that exists. You won't get slammed around as much.
Yeah.
But I haven't tested that one yet. I'm sure I'll do it accidentally sooner or later.
Yeah. So I think maybe the end of the summer, when you guys are done with your sailing season, and if you do venture up north, we should do another episode and kind of learn about your experiences coming up here.
Yeah, if we survive the trip going north, it would make for a good episode.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff to see, and even if you only make it up as far as the Chesapeake this year and then turn around and go back, the Chesapeake is a great place.
Yeah.
So that'd be super. Very good. Well, hey, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you guys. Helen and Rich, I really enjoyed getting to know you and chatting with you here. Thank you so much for that original email, Rich, where you reached out to me and said you were a listener. That's what started this whole thing. So thanks again. And I hope our paths can cross in the future again.
Hope so too.
And tell Herr Wassermann that we say hello.
I will.
Es geht
Yeah.
gut, Munster.
Yes. Yes. Very good. Take care and thanks again.
Auf
Okay.
Wiedersehen.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bela, a really interesting guest with great stories. One thing that struck me is they really cycled through a lot of different boats. Is this typical or is this couple a little bit unique?
Well, it depends. That's the classic answer to any question, right? It depends. So I think what drives that change for a lot of people is that their needs change, right? You go from sail, even if you look at me, I learned how to sail on a sunfish on a lake. And, that migrated into sailing on the ocean, salt water. So you need a different type of boat. So I think part of it has to do with that people's needs change, where they sail, of course, and the type of sailing they're doing. Is it day sailing, meaning you go out to sail for a few hours and you come back? Or is it short trips? You go out for 3 or 4 days. Or is it long trips? You go out for a couple of weeks. Or are you living aboard for an extended period of time? Either, 4 to 6 months, or maybe full time you're living aboard. So you can imagine that as your sailing needs change, the type and size of boat that you're on is going to change. So I think it's driven by the type of sailing you do, number one. Number two, part of it's a personality trait, I'll call it, right? Some people buy a new car every 2 or 3 years. Other people drive the same car for 20. So part of that's just kind of personal needs and desires and wants and stuff. So I think those are the two things that sort of drive that equation.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. The other thing that really struck me was this discussion about the challenges and benefits of keeping a boat in Florida. I have a lot of relatives that live in Florida. I've spent a lot of time there, especially during hurricane season. I thought that was really interesting, especially, we're recording this the first week of July, and the first major hurricane of the season pretty early is, heading through the Caribbean right now. Do you have to deal with issues like this for your boat in Rhode Island?
Some we do. So I think that I've had the boat now 5 years, is the 5th season. And we had one year we actually had 2 hurricanes kind of come close by. One of them came close enough, and all of the models said we got to get ready, and so they hauled a lot of boats. So the way they deal with it up north is, or at least my marina is, they haul a bunch of boats, they put them on land, and you sort of got to get on the list. And I didn't get on the list soon enough because they can only haul so many boats. So I just went up and, took off all the sails and took off the Dodger and the Bimini and turned the boat around in the slip so it faces into the wind, and doubled up all my lines, and the storm sort of missed us. Interesting enough, many insurance policies will pay you, or let me rephrase that, will reimburse you if there's a named storm that's coming into your area. They will reimburse you for getting the boat hauled out and then put back in the water, because that's about, depending upon the size of your boat, it could be a $700 to $1,000 bill to take a boat out of the water, block it up, and then to put it back into the water. So that's happened once in 5 years. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. It's certainly not something that's fun to do, but it's going to happen again. So you just got to get ready for it. The things that he also talked about was having to hire a diver or do something because stuff grows on your boat so quickly down in the warm water. So we don't have that up here. We get less bottom growth. I paint the bottom of my boat with the special anti-fouling paint, which basically helps to prevent things from growing on it. And I get 2 seasons out of my bottom paint. The stuff's expensive. It's like $200 a gallon, and it takes like 2.5 gallons to paint the bottom of my boat. So that's a nice thing that I don't have to deal with, right? I don't have to have the bottom of my hull scraped every several weeks because the stuff just grows. It always amazes me how stuff grows in salt water. And I don't understand the chemistry, because like in fresh water, even in warm fresh water, you get some algae growth, but nothing else. But in salt water, man, you get all sorts of stuff growing, and it's incredible. And it'll attach itself to anything. Like our docks at the marina are plastic, and there's all sorts of stuff growing on them. It's just amazing to me. I think
this would be cool. Maybe if there's any listeners that are marine biologists or know a good marine biologist, that might be a good podcast episode, right? To talk about the biology of saltwater and why stuff grows so quickly.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's just, every time I go to the marina, I'm just amazed at the abundance of marine life in the salt water there, having spent many years fishing and sailing and having a cabin on Lake George. It's freshwater seems to have a lot less marine life in it. So yeah, it's remarkable to me. I think the other big thing that's a big difference is in Florida, and not just in Florida, but in many places where it's warm. We shouldn't be just talking about Florida. This is sort of places where it's warm and humid. The humidity is a big issue because you get the boat's kind of closed up and it's really humid, and you'll get mold. Well, mold is another thing, right? It's like amazing. How does mold grow on a piece of plastic? It's like, I don't understand it. But again, it's somehow it'll grow. So they have to run dehumidifiers, as Rich was talking about. They have to run sometimes dehumidifiers on their boats, and other people have talked about that on the podcast. So that's another thing we really don't have to deal with up here.
Yeah, interesting. All things that, as Northerners, right, we didn't really have to worry about and think about. But and I mean, maybe staying on the topic of changing climate and weather patterns is, do you think the popularity of, I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Florida, and we've had lots of guests on that sail in Florida, and this seems like it's kind of a premier U.S. kind of sailing center, on the East Coast because of the weather. Do you think that the popularity of sailing is at any kind of risk from the changing patterns that we're seeing in climate and weather?
I don't think so. I think maybe where you sail might change depending upon climate change and the weather, right? I mean, so here's my sort of macro view of that, right? Some parts of the earth are habitable and other parts are not. So you can live in certain parts of the earth and other parts you can't, either because it's too hot or it's too cold. And as weather patterns change, those areas will change, right? As places get warmer, certain places that are too cold to live in now or too cold to grow alfalfa or corn, right? You'll be able to grow alfalfa and corn. And other parts will get too hot and too dry. But so I don't think it'll change. But I think, to me, the larger impact of this is that we have, as humans, we have expanded our footprint into parts of the earth that, if we didn't have the technology we have, air conditioning, heat, warm clothing, we wouldn't live there. So as populations have gotten denser and land has gotten more scarce, we've sort of forced ourselves to live in places where maybe we wouldn't normally live. Whether it be low-lying regions or places where it's really hot. I mean, think about air conditioning and how that invention changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
It made many parts of the world where you wouldn't live. You could live there as long as you had electricity and some air conditioning. And think about,
look at Arizona. People live in the middle of a desert. You know what I mean? Right. And again, that was not possible before air conditioning, for sure.
That's right.
Or at least they only the density and the amount of people that live there.
Right.
Now.
Or they only
there, but few.
They only live there, between November and April. Right.
And
so they were migratory, right? There was a reason people were migratory. One of it was because the animals were migratory, but also because of weather patterns.
It's all connected.
Yeah, it's all connected. So, but I think the thing that's going on in Florida right now is there's these anchoring bans that are so people are starting to say you can't anchor your boat here, which is interesting because it's been generally thought that the oceans are sort of communal property. You don't, if I have a house and it's on water, my property goes up to the water line. I don't own the water. So I don't have control over what happens in the water. And what's happening is there's in some parts of the United States, there are places where communities are banning people from plopping their anchor down and sort of living on their boat, and so that's sort of an interesting struggle that's going on right now in various parts of the boating world. And it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Fascinating. Because here, even the coastline, even the shoreline, in many states and many regions of Germany, that you have to give access to the public. It's not even that you can own up to the shoreline. It's you still have to let people walk on the beach, essentially, right? You know how in the US, like big pieces of beach are fenced off. Right. And I think for an anchoring ban here, the only thing that I've ever seen, and again, I haven't sailed or boated extensively, but is when it's a safety issue, right? And I think that's the only time that communities would put up a ban, is if there's a health and safety issue. It's near something where there'd be risk. But that's a fascinating thing. The other thing, besides for these bans, because I think you're right, there's huge potential if the privatization of the seas, right, kind of happens in the US, the coast, is insurance, right? And when the insurance companies stop insuring sailboats in Florida, because remember, we had a guest where they had to move their boat at a certain time or sell it because of the insurance, right? And I'll bet you if the insurers stop insuring boats in certain regions because of too much risk of hurricane damage or something like that, that would probably be another element that might change patterns. But yes, people underestimate risk all the time, right? That's common.
Yeah, so that the insurance stuff with boats is very common. So, for example, on my policy, my boat needs to be out of the water by November 1st, and until May 1st. It can't be in the water. And that's not really about hurricanes. That's just about cold weather and all that kind of stuff.
Freeze damage.
But it also has a clause in there that says during hurricane season, meaning June 1st till November 30th, I can't be any further south than the Chesapeake Bay.
Yep.
So there are restrictions. Of course, you can get those restrictions taken off for a little
You
extra.
just got to pay. Right.
Extra premium. Right. But I think you're absolutely right. It's those types of things that will trigger increases or decreases in certain types of recreational activities. I can remember, I can't remember, it was in the 70s or 80s. There was like a luxury tax that they instituted on boats, cars, airplanes.
I remember this.
Cost over, I forget what a dollar amount was. And it basically shut down, and it was pretty steep luxury tax. And it basically shut down the sale of boats, not just sailboats, but motorboats. It's kind of over a certain dollar amount. It just that industry just died for a number of years. So I think it's those types of things that'll have, quite frankly, a larger impact, because the global warming stuff compared to a regulation is slow. Right. A regulation goes into effect September 1st. I mean, boom, that's boom.
Right. If your insurance policy changes September 1st, people are going to act. It's interesting, right? It's what motivates them.
Right. Anyway, we digressed a little bit.
Yeah, but interesting stuff. I don't know. That was a great interview, I thought. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Well, listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode, and we hope you found the conversation interesting and thought-provoking as well. And as always, if you have questions about what we've discussed or anything, please get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting app. And help spread the word about the podcast. Leave us a review. Or if you know of someone that would make a good guest, let us know. We'll reach out to them and see if they're interested in sharing their experiences with us and you, our listeners, on the show. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See you all soon.
Sounds great, Bela. Thanks for everything. And from over here in Münster, Germany, auf Wiedersehen.